Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to UnitedWeTech. The show was on hold a little while we were busy with doing some stuff around the past summit. We apologize for those who've been following us and have been wondering what happened to the interview series. We're just planning to resume this after a gap of nearly 2 months. So I don't think we will have any significant gaps going forward, and we thank everyone for waiting for the next episode to drop. So before we get started, let me just say a brief thank you to our sponsor. Share screen. So our episode sponsor is Joe Fleming. Joe runs a consulting company called SQL Taylor Consulting, and he donates $20 to Girls Who Code for every guest we have. If you have any needs for remote DBA work, please consider reaching out to Joe. And thank you, Joe, for sponsoring us. So our guest for today is a very dear friend of mine, Tracy Boggiano. I will let Tracy introduce herself, and then we are going to talk about how DBAs can face audits and how you can do really well. Take it away, Tracy. Tell us something about yourself first.
Well, I've been doing database stuff for 20 years. My favorite, most important job is being a foster care advocate for foster kids. I've been doing that for 19 years, going on 20 in June. I'm also a mental health advocate. Those are my favorite things to do. Database stuff just pays bills, but I happen to be decent at that as well. So you can go to my blog and read more stuff. My name or databasesuperhero.com. So
Tracy is also a fellow Passion Award winner and my co-lead at the TriPass SQL Server user group, as well as SQL Server data platform MVP.
Oh yeah, that stuff too. I did snag the last Passion Award.
So let's start talking about audit. Assume I'm a new DBA. I am newly hired and I am told that I would have to face an audit. What do you think I should be ready for?
Well, that depends on what type of audit you're doing, because there's different compliances that you have to adhere to. You got SOX, right. You got PCI, you've got CIS, you've got HIPAA, you've got DISA. So you have to know which one you have to prepare for, or you could just be doing an internal audit because your auditors just,
I was thinking more on the lines of internal audit, because most DBAs where I have worked, at least, they have to face internal audit, and there are occasions when you have to sit with an external auditor, but internal audit is very common.
Yeah, all mine have been external auditors. Most of the time we don't have internal people. Usually our internal people are preparing for external audits. So first you got to get your requirements from your auditors so you know what to do.
Right.
And then you got to be prepared for your auditors don't know jack about SQL Server.
Right. That's the hard part.
They don't know anything, and the worst thing you can do is try to explain it too much, because then that just leads to more questions and down rabbit holes. And you end up with gobs and gobs of stuff that they don't understand even more of. So, the best thing you can do is keep it simple. Use the KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid.
Don't try to use any technical jargon. Try to explain it on simple layman terms.
Keep it simple. Don't give them too much information, because the more information you give them, the more they're going to dig, and even less they're going to understand. Because if they try to go into permissions on SQL Server, you know how complex permissions are on SQL Server.
Right.
You can go all the way down to the column level. They don't need to know that. They really, unless there's something specific that needs it, and they don't even know if there's something specific that needs it most of the time, because they don't know the application.
Right.
So, I recently had a security auditor, because I just started a new job in May, and they wanted to know what SQL authenticated accounts had DB owner on the databases.
Right.
And I'm like, we should be worried about sysadmin, but okay, here's the DB owners. Because like there's so many permissions on there that they're not worrying about for the NT authenticated accounts.
Right.
They're just like, oh, we know they have access, but you don't know what access they have.
Right.
So I just gave them what they asked for, and then they wanted to know what databases were on every server and what the purpose was. And I was like, oh, I haven't gotten that far. I just started in May. You can't have that information yet because I'm still trying to gather that information. So it's like, you can only give them what they ask for most of the time, because they don't even know what they're going to do with that information. Like I had to get them to clarify what they meant by, because they didn't even use the word owner. They used a different word. So sometimes they don't even use words that match up with SQL words. So you have to make sure you get them to clarify what they want, because they may ask you for something and then you give them something else, and then it's not even what they want.
Yeah. So they're mostly concerned about what is defined as sensitive data, right? Who has access to it? Like if you work in a healthcare company, typically HIPAA protected patient information and such, who has access to it? What are they doing with that, and what level of access, that sort of stuff?
Yes. And that's usually defined at the application layer and inside the applications where they need to be worried about that. And then that goes back down to making sure you don't have too many people with sysadmin, DB owner, data reader, and do they actually know what that means? Again, most of the time it depends on how your auditors, what they know, and you've got to define that stuff, and they're going to have to define what they want to know for you to be able to know what to do on the audit. Unfortunately, I'm working at a healthcare company now, and I worked at DocuSign before that is just as strict as a healthcare company, because they have that type of information in their system. And I've worked with all kinds of different auditors because I've had SOX compliant at a different company. I've had PCI, I had the sys auditing stuff at DocuSign, plus the sensitive data at DocuSign, and I have found every auditor knows something different that they want, even though we're dealing with the same type of data. So because with the SIS compliance for the government, we have to set up SQL audit so that it records everything. But that's the only time I've ever had to do that. Internal auditors don't want that sometimes. They don't know that you can do that.
So you mentioned different types of audit, right? SOX, HIPAA, blah, many, all the different kinds there are. When you were told that an external auditor is going to come and audit you, let's say on SOX, how did you prepare for it? Like, did you read up on SOX and what it is about and what kind of questions they're going to ask, or what kind of prep work did you do?
Well, the most recent one I got prepared for was the CIS audit that the government puts on you for. We were having a government data center, so we got the list of requirements down, and we made our system as hardened as we could towards those compliances. There were some that we weren't going to adhere to, like not having database mail, not having DAC. I mean, there's just some things that we need to be able to support the system. So we wrote up the reasons why we wouldn't do it, and the other ones we implemented. I spent 3 months implementing SQL audit because the performance on it was not up to what we could do on our current hardware. Right. So we had to do lots of filtering. So I got to write a nice long blog article about how to set up filtering on SQL audit, and I learned a whole bunch about SQL audit that I thought I'd never ever learn. So you have to take what they have available and go one line at a time through it and decide what you can do, and write up justifications on what you can do and what you can't do. And the things you can't do immediately, you can write, hey, I'm going to do this in 6 months, a year, and here's my plan, and present them a document for each thing that you can or you can't do, and justify it to your auditors, and they will say, okay, you can do that in a year, or okay, you can get away with not doing it if you write up the right justification for it. I spent too much time doing audits last 3 years.
So what happens if they ding you on something, like they say that this is not acceptable and you've been doing it for some time? How do you handle it with management as well as with them?
Well, we had this situation come up at previous job where we got dinged on something. We just wrote up why it was that way,
Mhm.
because it was something that we needed set, turned on. It was startup store procedures. We used replication. Replication has startup store procedures. There's no way around it.
Mhm.
We also used, I think it's CLR that requires a startup store procedure or something. Yeah. So strong data types in 2016. There's something with CLR and geographical data types that it's not set to secure or something. I can't remember the exact thing, but it's set that way in 2017, but we're still in 2016. So there's nothing I can do about it because it's a system data type and I can't change the internals of, I probably could, but I might break something.
Mhm.
So it's like, we have to just say, okay, this is the plan to fix it. We're upgrading to 2017 or 2019 or whatever version of SQL in the next year or two. This is the plan to do it. They have to accept that as a mediation for that because there is no other mediation for it.
Mm.
And for replication, that is how our system works. Do you want your data to work or not? And technically,
What was the objection to startup stored procedures?
I don't know. They don't give you a reason.
Hmm.
They just have a general rule in DISA that you can't have startup store procedures. They don't give you I don't remember reading a justification for why you can't have startup store procedures. But it's like when I wrote all the DISA stuff into DBA checks, or that was actually CIS. When I wrote it into DBA checks, I filtered out the startup store procedures for replication because I can't do anything about it. And for SSIS, because it has startup store procedures as well. It's like we shouldn't get dinged for that because that's the way SQL's
That's
made.
how the system works.
And audit software should take that into account.
Yes.
And so should auditors. They should be smart enough for that, but they're not.
Yeah.
I made DBA check smart enough for it. So
Yeah. What are the concerns around backups and who has access to, like, typically I know when I used to face them, I used to have a lot of challenges around developers or DBAs would sometimes need production like data in the lower environments and such. So I remember facing a lot of objection around that because we used to restore some production data for them to test with some of the tables masked, but still it wasn't acceptable. Have you faced anything like that? Also around where you keep your backup files and that sort of stuff.
yeah, I have hard rules about that, especially at the last few companies I work at because of the sensitive data, that production data doesn't go down to test. And if it does, you have to scramble the data. We have at my current company, we have a process that scrambles the data so that the PII data is not, means nothing. It just doesn't, it's not, you can't read it. And at my previous company, there was no restoring anything fraud related, nothing. Now,
Yeah, even
fraud.
my company here too, yeah, where I work too, it's like that nothing is allowed. But some places are okay with select tables block.
Yeah, I've had, there's like the company I'm at now, there's certain tables that just get scrubbed basically with crappy, names and stuff so that it's not.
Do they look into where
Doesn't
you
mean
keep your
anything.
backups, where you keep your backups, who has access to them, all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, the backups are only accessible by the servers that are backing them up and the DBAs.
And how about what are the permissions the DBAs have? I know I've had to justify a bunch of stuff like what are the
Yeah, the DBAs have access to it because what are you gonna do in the middle of the night?
Yeah.
I mean, I've always maintained that we have to have access to it because I am not fighting through some security person in the middle of the night if I have to do a restore. If they want me to fight through somebody in the middle of the night, fine. Don't call me first. I have had the situation where I've had to wait 6 hours to get access to something before while something was down and they could not make product at a company.
So I've had to use monitoring tools, like not the SQL monitoring tools, because SQL monitoring tools are again configurable by a DBA. So where I worked, I had to put in an STAB-based system. I think it was the IBM product called Guardian. And there was one other product too that was similar, which, DBAs cannot tamper with what that thing monitors, and it monitors everything, like including all, whatever you do all day. So they would look at the logs of what the DBAs did and ask you questions like, why did you do this? Why did you do that? Why have you added this new person? Blah, 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 that sort of stuff.
Yeah, what we did at my previous company is we just had automated reports that went out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they had stuff that automatically sent to our email, and then we had to justify what was in the email once a quarter for access.
Mm.
So if it was different than last quarter, we had to say why it was different.
Mm.
So we had quarterly access reports to stuff.
Mm.
And if there was somebody different in there, we had to say, hey, this person was hired, or uh-oh, we gotta take that away. So
yeah.
we just had it automated, so there was no control over who did what, and we didn't have access to change permissions to stuff as far as Active Directory or anything like that. Everything was controlled through groups by the security group. So if permissions changed to the backup share or something like that, we didn't do it. So someone else did it, and then we didn't know about it anyway. So when we got the quarterly access report, it was like, oh, who did it? It wasn't us anyway. So we had to go and figure out who did it anyway. So and we had change requests for every permission that was made, and we actually put the quarterly access report into a change request to say, hey, this is what it was, and it had to be signed off by management saying, yes, this is actually what it is, and it's been verified by so and so, and then the manager so and so, and then the VP signed off on it, and then I don't know who was above a VP. I don't know, director, VP, blah blah, I don't know, all the chain of command signed off on this thing that said it was valid. They had like 20 sign-offs, it felt like.
Would you ask a new DBA, somebody you're interviewing, about whether or not they are experienced in facing an audit, or would you be looking for specific skill sets in someone if you're hiring a DBA when it comes to audit? Do you think that's necessary?
It depends on how intense your environment is on auditing. I mean, I have never been asked. I mean, my current job asked me if I had any familiarity with HIP, and I was like, nope, and they still hired me, and we're a healthcare company. So so far I've only had that one question about security, and it was like, it seems like maybe they should have asked that question a long time ago. Certainly they've been in business for a while. But I mean, I don't think it's necessary to have that skill set unless you have a lot of auditing stuff already set up, and somebody had, and you need somebody to concentrate on it as a big bulk of their job. But if they're just coming in and they need to, just do it here, there, and touch it once a year when the auditors come in and provide information, I don't think it's that important. I mean, they need to be familiar with security in general and how it works, but not necessarily, how to handle an audit.
I think I agree with you. I think it depends on how much of how important the organization thinks it is. I would think though that if you're a lead, if you're a DBA team lead, like I was a DBA team lead once, and I would spend at least 2 days a month with internal audit and then with external audit. So there were certain skills that my boss wanted me to have. I even went to train for that. Just like you said, when we started, right? How to explain things in layman terms and not get too technical about it. And don't go down rabbit holes explaining too much. Know when to stop. And then, if it gets too complicated, get your boss or whoever it is involved. Be careful what you say.
Yeah. Like I said, it depends on how intense it is for that org. I mean, most orgs I've been in, you're not doing it every month.
Right.
It's a once a year thing. You prep for it like the month ahead of time. You're gathering the information and you're doing it. Because I mean, I've been in some orgs where the audits are so silly. You have to do print screens and make sure you have the timestamp down showing in the bottom. I'm like, why? Why do I have to do print screens of every little thing and make sure the timestamps down in the bottom? Like, can't I just make a script that spits it out and does, like, write host date PowerShell or something? I mean, like, literally, I would have to produce 50 pages of print screens and make sure and if I forgot a timestamp, I had to go back and take the print screen again.
Yeah, go on.
Just silly stuff like that, And then one audit I went through where they wanted to see the backups, and I was at I'm embarrassed, a company that was still using maintenance plans, and I was trying to get them to use all the scripts, but they weren't doing it yet. So the auditors literally watched the head DBA go through maintenance plans, and that was their proof that they were working. And I don't think that's proof that they work. I just don't. Show me the history where it's running, not that they're actually set, you have the GUI set up. That doesn't prove they run. Show me job history. But they just went through the GUI and said, here is, I'm just like, yeah, okay, yeah, see, auditors.
Yeah.
They probably understand that better than all the scripts, to be honest. But I think to me, all the scripts are better because you can just go to the command log and do a select and say, see, here's all of it ran successfully.
Have you had
more valid proof than the GUI maintenance plan?
Have you had challenges with the kind of tools do you use with the databases? Have they objected to that? The monitoring tools, third-party monitoring tools, or any other reporting tools and things like that?
I've been so lucky that my company's been too cheap to buy third-party tools. That I have had to homegrown everything that I've used for audits. I mean, I've homegrown everything. I've only had one company I've ever had actually pay for a monitoring tool, just regular SQL monitoring.
So the challenge I've had is that monitoring tools require logins that have sysadmin access, and when it belongs to a third party, they don't trust that. So I've had one or two places I've faced that challenge where they didn't like the fact that the monitoring tool was using a sysadmin login to run, and they wanted to know what that could do, and if there was a chance it could read data and send it to somebody outside, and blah blah blah. So there are cases where that happens.
Well, these days we have the view server state thing that you can use instead of sysadmin. So you actually can, most good monitoring tools are using view server state and not sysadmin.
Yeah, nowadays a lot has changed. Yeah, that's true. Have you had any challenges with the hosting environments, like cloud hosted databases?
No, not really. We currently have some cloud stuff where I'm at now, and it pretty much works. To me, it works the same as being on-prem, except it's in the cloud. It's not as centralized as I like. I feel things are more centralized when they're on servers, just because that's what I'm more used to.
Yeah,
and I think it's more the way we've got it set up where I'm at, because everything's in different subscriptions. So I have to do lots more work to access things because everything's in a different subscription instead of just being in one thing. So it's a lot more work for me to get to things, but overall, I mean, I use the same tool sets to get to things and do things as I do everything else. I mean, I'm in PowerShell all day long.
So in the early days of the cloud, using database as a service and having your database co-reside with all sorts of other databases was a big no for companies that are very audit heavy, because they were scared that other people may be able to take a peek at your environment. And initially there was skepticism even around the hosting companies, but later on a lot of companies got themselves certified, like Microsoft got certified, and then other companies got certified and such. So slowly that thing, I think that's dropped away now. But in the early days that used to exist too, that They were worried the companies were not certified enough and were not safe enough. They might have breaches themselves.
Yeah, and you know, Microsoft's got built-in firewall stuff now,
Right.
and you know, I mean, I have to whitelist like IP ranges to get in. Like when I first started at my current company, like my IP address was blocked everywhere, and I was like, hey, wait a minute, shouldn't we have like a data center like thing for our jump boxes so that we can actually get in without having to whitelist my IP? You know, and they're like, oh, I thought that was already done. It's like, no, I'm blocked. Because it like took me a couple of days to figure out why I was blocked. I was like, my permissions are, because I was doing it all via PowerShell. So I thought it was my PowerShell that wasn't working, getting me in, but it was really just my IP was blocked.
Mhm.
I was like, oh yeah. Because I was doing more, I didn't have cloud at the last job. So and my Azure thing I have open to my house. So I wasn't having that problem with my personal stuff. So I was like, what's going on? When I tested on my personal stuff, it works fine. I'd unblocked it years ago. That's why.
So that's about all I had by way of questions. Is there anything else you want to say to our audience? On the subject?
No, I mean, that's basics of handling an audit. You know, you've got SQL audit that you can set up to monitor anything that happens to your SQL server. Josephine's wrote a book that came out via A-Press. So
Oh, that's nice. I'll add that in the show notes. Yeah.
Somebody should check that out. If you need to be CIS compliant for your SQL servers, I have a blog post on that lets you check that via DBA checks. This is to come via DBA checks when I have time. But other than that, and the CIS compliant SQL or the DISA compliant audit is on my blog as well, as far as how to do filtering and stuff. So, because that took me 3 months to get correct.
I will include the links to both in the show notes.
So, but other than that, that'll do the SQL specific stuff.
So where can people find you next? What are your next plans? What is the next conference next?
I'll be at Summit. I'm not presenting at Summit because I did a pre-recorded session for the learning pathway for DBA checks. I've got a couple of user groups I'm presenting at, but no major conferences at this point in time. I have been busy doing foster care advocacy work instead. Unfortunately, I am advocating for 11 kids right now, so I'm a little busy with that instead of doing community stuff. So
good for you. That's a bigger cause.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that is taking up the bulk of my time, and if I have to pick kids over, traveling to conferences, I'm going to pick my sibling set of 7 I took on last year.
Oh my, that's a lot of kids.
Yeah, that's the only reason I got so many is because they asked me to take 7 on in an emergency. So they needed somebody in a hurry, and I was the pinch hitter. So, yeah, I have to pick the kids over other stuff at the moment.
Good for you. You have your priorities right, Tracy.
Yeah, I have cut back a lot in the community in the past year to take care of these kids.
All right. Thank you so much for your time.
No problem.
All right. Have a good weekend.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.